About 10 years before Lance passed away, he had a series of grand mal seizures that put him in the hospital for a few days and added a medication that made it harder for him to get around. It also caused a lot of side effects, and he started ending up in the hospital more frequently. That first year, he was hospitalized 7 or 8 times. And I noticed that every time he came home from the hospital, if it had been more than a couple of days, he was having a harder time getting around. And they started putting him into care facilities after a hospitalization, and he would spend a week or two doing inpatient OT, PT rehab to regain some of his strength and independence that he had lost while he was in the hospital. But then he would come home and he would be not very good about keeping up with his exercises. And I couldn't tell him what to do because I was just his nagging wife. So I hired a personal trainer, and that turned out to be a really great thing for him. But within a couple of months, I started noticing that he was so much stronger. He was getting around a lot better, and he had regained a lot of his independence, but it still wasn't completely safe for him because he had the cognitive decline and he was still using a walker to get around at home. So I started working out with a personal trainer too, so that I could be stronger because Lance was 6 feet tall and he weighed around 200 pounds. If he lost his balance or if he fell, that was going to be pretty dangerous for me, especially if I wasn't strong enough to handle it. So I started working out with a personal trainer too. And we went through several personal trainers over the years because, well, for various reasons, we needed to move to a different location or it just wasn't working out for one reason or another. And we had moved to the local rec center in town because it was just a few miles from our house. So I hired a personal trainer for Lance at the rec center, and I thought I'll be okay just working out on my own. And I would go in and I would do Zumba classes and I would walk around the track. And I just didn't feel comfortable being in the weight room anymore. So I talked to the manager of the weight room and asked if she could pair me with a personal trainer and kind of gave her an idea of what I was looking for. She already knew Lance, so she already knew his limitations. And she said, I think I've got the perfect person for you. Let me go ahead and check with her and see what she says. So we scheduled an appointment. I showed up at the rec center a few minutes late. I was running late. I was always running late. It wasn't on purpose. It was because I just never had enough time in the day. And I got to the weight room and my trainer, Jenna, wasn't ready for me yet. So I sat down on the bench and I waited for her. And she came over to introduce herself. And I'm going to let her take the story from here because we have very different ideas of how this day went.
I believe you were scheduled after I had already done a couple of appointments with other clients of mine. And I sometimes would tend to have my appointments go over a couple minutes. I'd be finishing up and with one, and then the next one would be a little late. And I think yours was probably toward the end of the line. And so I was still working with another client. And I always hated when that happened, but it happened frequently because I could never quite get everything done in the hour. So I came over and I knew who Lance was because one of the other trainers in the weight room had been working with him. And so I hadn't met you guys, but I knew who he was and I knew that you guys had been around and that you came in the afternoons. And this was in the morning. So I came over and introduced myself and apologized for being late. Ruthann said that's okay. I was a little late too. And off we went. So the first time I would meet with a client, when I'd have a new client, I would do have them do some movement patterns, kind of test out strength to see if there were areas that need correction, so on and so forth. more of a diagnostic, I would say. And so we went back into this far room that we had set up for functional training. And I was talking to Ruthann about her history. What is your workout history? What kinds of things have you done in the past? Did you play sports? Do you have injuries? So on and so forth. And everything is like, I do this, this, and this. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. And it was very sharp, very confident. And I realized that maybe I had gotten myself into a little different situation than I was used to. So we went back in the room and I was asking her to do different movement patterns. And she reminded me about every 12 and a half seconds, I know what I can do. So I would say, oh, okay, okay, that's fine. That's fine. We don't need to do that. And I was sure that this woman hated my guts immediately. I don't know if that's true, but did you hate my guts?
I did not hate your guts. I had worked out with a trainer who was always pushing me to do things that I knew I couldn't do. And I had been in a car accident right before Lance and I got married. And I've always had problems with my right side. So my right hip and my lower back, I've just always had problems with. And I listened to that trainer tell me that I could do it, even though I knew I couldn't, and I hurt myself. And so I was tired of being pushed around. I was tired of being bullied. And it wasn't just that trainer, there were other situations. Being an advocate for someone is really challenging. And I spent a lot of time protecting him and advocating for him. And that put me in some really uncomfortable situations. And it made me kind of a target for bullying and manipulation. And I just was going to make sure that I wasn't in that situation again. So it wasn't you that I hated, it was everyone that I hated at the time. And I know that that sounds terrible. I just was so fed up. I just had it with people in general. I was like, I love to work out. I love exercising. I love how it makes me feel. But this working out at the rec center at that time was something that I had to do because I needed to stay strong to take care of Lance. And I really didn't have the time. And so that's where all of that came from. And I walked away from there feeling like, okay, first of all, I was happy that you were not on time because I had such a hard time being anywhere on time. And that I always felt bad about that. But most of the time, there was nothing I could do about it because it was something that Lance needed as I was running out the door, or a caregiver needed something, or a caregiver was late, whatever. It was really challenging for me to get anywhere on time. So I was really happy that you were running a few minutes late.
Well, I will tell you that I wasn't sure after that first day if you were going to continue with me or not. You were you were very insistent, and you were very you put up very clear boundaries. So I was a little nervous that maybe I wasn't a good fit for you, but I thought I saw some things that we could work on together. I was so surprised when you came back.
Were you talking about like personality things that you thought we could work on? It was, I left there feeling like this is going to be a good thing. This is going to be good. I like her. She's very knowledgeable in what she's doing, and she's going to be able to help me. And so I left there feeling really good. And I'm sorry that I left you feeling like I hated you.
Well, I always give everybody a couple tries for sure. And for me, I was aware that everybody doesn't always feel super comfortable the first time they walk into an encounter with me as a personal trainer. So some people would get nervous, people would get kind of strange and maybe talk about things they could do that maybe they really couldn't do, or they would tell me all about their lengthy middle school football history and bring up strange things that had nothing to do with where they were, as a middle-aged person. But it, it was always interesting to me that people viewed me as some type of strange authority figure. And I always looked at it as, I'm here to serve you. You tell me what you want, and I'm going to help you as best I can to try and get to that goal. But I I had never been the kind of trainer that wanted to try and force someone to do something that they didn't want to do. And so I thought that was very strange. When you eventually shared all that with me, I was like appalled at some of the stories that you shared, of experiences you'd had in the past. And I would never try and ask a client to do something they didn't want to do. I always try to encourage and nudge if they thought they couldn't do something and I thought they could. And we did that quite a bit, you and I. I think I nudged you after I realized you didn't hate me.
Yes, you nudged me probably every time that we worked out together. And then I started bringing Lance in with me to the training sessions because I just didn't have enough help, caregiver help. So he would come in and he would sit in his wheelchair and he would have his lap desk and he would just sit there and he would work on his word finds while I was working out. And he would chime in every now and then telling me what I was doing wrong or telling me that I was doing a good job. And we got my friend Karen in there to work out with us too. And that was a really fun time having all four of us in there.
We had some good laughs. Lance, he always cracked me up when he'd have his face buried in his word find, and out of nowhere he'd pipe up and say, "Put back into it," or something like that. And we'd have to stop what we were doing to look at Lance and see what it was he was trying to tell us. Well, so and then after a while, we worked out together for a long time. Um, and then I think, was it a year?
It was about a year after I had been working out with you that we started. Lance's trainer was moving to, he was moving a few hours away, and we really needed a new trainer for him. And because of his dementia and his memory loss, it was hard to get him in with new people. And he already knew you and he was already comfortable with you. So I asked if you would be willing to do that. And at that time, by then, we had him working out at home pretty much most of the time. I did have him at the gym for short periods of time during the year, but the majority of the year, because of the flu and all the viruses going around, I kept him at home. And so I talked to you about that, whether you would be willing to be his trainer too.
Um, that was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So it made me nervous at first. I'd never done anything like that. I'd always worked with very able-bodied individuals. So somebody that had a lot of limitations was very new for me. And I was, I think at first I maybe was a little concerned that I wouldn't be able to help him or I might hurt him. And, I think you were very good at encouraging me that you would kind of guide me into what he could and couldn't do. And, I just used the basics of what I knew, and it actually worked out really well. And then coming to your home to work out with him in your home that was another hurdle. I'd never done that. And that really stretched me to kind of think through what I could do with, I would say, more limited equipment. You guys had a lot of stuff in your house, but obviously the rec facility had everything. So I had to get more creative. So it was good. It really kind of stretched me and my abilities as a personal trainer. But those were some very fun times come into the house. And that's when I would say we became close friends, was coming into your home and being in that more intimate setting. And it was fun. And then that's when I started bringing my family into your life.
It was so great having you come over and spend that time. By then, it had already been about 7 years that we had regular caregivers in the house. So I was used to having people in the house, but I was still very protective and very private. And you were so respectful of everything when you came in there, and you didn't go wandering around the house and you didn't go peeking into things. You were there for a purpose, and that's what you kept it as. But that is when we started becoming friends, and we would have just these, even a 5-minute conversation that's usually about how much time you and I had without Lance being there. He was usually in the bathroom when you arrived. And so we would have a few minutes to chat. And those few minutes were always very deep and meaningful. And those conversations meant a lot to me because by then I had been living with my husband who had dementia for so many years, and our conversations had dwindled a lot, and they were not the in-depth conversations that they had once been. So having those few minutes with you every time you came over was really great. I really enjoyed that. And then having your children come in and become a part of our life too. Your one daughter cleaned our bathroom for us. Your other daughter helped me out in the garden. Your son helped me do a lot of things in the yard. We actually ended up hiring him when he turned 18, and he became one of Lance's caregivers, and he would go do day trips with us. And he did a lot of little projects that I couldn't do myself and that obviously Lance couldn't do. And you got your sister involved and the rest of your kids, and we all just had so much fun together. Do you have a favorite memory from that time?
I think of the time as a whole. I don't always think of it in fragmented moments, more as one whole time of the time we spent with Lance. And so when I think about it, I have these memories that flash through my brain um, all at once. And probably the central figure is just the time when we were all over there and we came over to paint rocks and played. My sister came and we played music and sang, and that was just a really really precious time. But I think of his birthday party, and I think of when my son and I came over and shoveled a lot of rocks, and those rocks. There was a pile of rocks in the driveway, and they needed to go in the backyard. And I said, "Hey, bud, you want to come help me with this?" And he was, I don't know, in his early 20s, and he said, "Sure." Maybe he was just 20. Sure. And then we get over there, and it's this huge pile. And I said, "Okay, I'll help you." And we did, and we had so much fun. But I think there were just all these times that I remember, all the times standing next to him while he was riding his stationary bike, and just talking to him and having him try and sell your things at a yard sale. Um, there were so many memories, and I just appreciated being a part of your family, or being allowed to come in and be a part of your family, and that you welcomed my family as well. I'm pretty protective of my family and my kids, and so to have you welcoming them in a way that felt very genuine, and there was so much kindness, and they got to see something that they would have never ever had the opportunity to see. And you guys had such a unique situation. I I think that was very impactful to all of my kids. I know it was to me, to see that not everybody lives the same kind of life that we do. And that there are people going through different things. And I think it produced an increased empathy and kindness in them that will serve them well for the rest of their life. So
Well, it was really special that you shared your children with us because Lance and I weren't able to have children, and that was always a heartache for us. And whenever people were willing to let us spend time with theirs, we just really enjoyed it. And we were so thankful to have that time with them. And young people bring such an energy that it was just always a joyful time having your kids around. They're full of energy. They all have very big personalities. And I wasn't sure how Lance would handle that because our life had become so simple and our world had become so small. And so having people in the house who were that full of energy and had that big of personalities, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a good thing for him or not, but it turned out to be probably one of the best things for both of us. And we loved all the time that we spent with you. And that's made our conversations here, that has made this work so well because you were such a big part of our life and you saw so much. And because I trusted you so much, that's just what makes this work too, I think.
I think so too. I know you guys, like I said, you guys provided this perspective that none of us would have ever had. And so I think my kids and I all grew into um, just into better people for having known you and for having spent time with you and Lance and for having watched Lance as he navigated the end of his life. That's not something that a lot of people get to witness. And we had a front row seat to that. And watching you navigate that, I think for me was so impactful as well, because I could try to empathize with you, but at the end of the day, I didn't understand your struggle or what you were going through. I didn't understand Lance's struggle or what he was going through. So I just had to watch him be supportive. And learning how to do that, I think, has been, I think, has served me very well. And I hope made me into a kinder person. So
Well, I think that you were already a kind person to begin with. I mean, just, and you showed that in every interaction that we had with you. And that time was just so meaningful. I know I've said that already, but I don't know what we would have done without you and your family. You had such a big impact on our life, and the time that we spent with you made me a better person. So I see things differently. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about our friendship is that we are very different. We've lived very different lives, and you it's so good to have friends that are different than you are because you learn and you grow through that.
I would agree with that. I think most of my closest friends I don't have much in common with on a in a very obvious way. You'd have to really dig below the surface to find our commonalities. And I think that's good. I think it's healthy. I think it stretches you and grows you. And I think you're of better use to more people when you can grow, become more well-rounded. And it's just good to have someone that questions, right? Why are you like that? Why do you do that? If you're friends with someone who's the same as you, they don't ever ask those questions and you never have to give an answer. So I think it's good to have those people in your life that aren't exactly like you to make you answer for why you are the way you are and why you do the things you do, and you get to know yourself better, right? I know myself better for having spent time around you and Lance, and I think that's a good thing.
I would agree with that. Well, I've mentioned that this was pretty much an unlikely friendship because our lives were so different from each other, but how were they different? I mean, do you want to share anything, Jenna, about your life?
Um, sure. I will start with one of the areas that we are the same is that we both grew up in large families. So I think that was something that connected us right away. Outside of the fact that we were, essentially working out together. I was your personal trainer and you had a history of, spending time in the gym and strength training. And so we had that in common. And then we found out that we were both raised in large families. So that was something else that we had in common. Um, and so we could share, stories of growing up in a large family and the dynamics of that. But where our stories probably took a pretty significant turn, I'll just say I probably got married way too young. We'll just start that. Um, but I started having a family. I had my oldest child when I was 20. Got married when I was 18 and had my oldest child when I was 20 and ended up with 5 kids. So I have 2 boys and 3 girls. And I stayed home with them. I raised them. I homeschooled them for a lot of years. Um, and it was the best thing I've ever done. So that was another thing we had in common was caregiving. I was a caregiver in a sense for children and babies. So that element of putting yourself aside to take care of someone else was something that I experienced on a different level. But the underlying elements of caregiving are, sacrifice and service to another person. And that was, I think, something that we did have in common is just that choice. Because I will tell you, as a mom, when I raised my kids, they were my number one priority. And I was very well aware of the fact that they would someday grow up to be adults. And I really wanted them to be adults that would have a positive impact on the world around them and be good and decent humans who would serve their communities, serve their families, serve the world around them. I wanted to raise people who were strong, who were tough, who were resilient, who advocated for themselves and advocated for others. So I was very deeply invested in being a mom, and I gave up a lot to be able to stay home with my kids. I remember one of the hardest things I would have to hear over the years was that I was so lucky that I got to stay home with my kids. But honestly, I gave up everything. We didn't have a fancy home. I drove old vehicles. We didn't take vacations. I didn't buy new clothes. We didn't eat out. We didn't have toys, like nothing. It was bare bones. We scraped by, but I don't regret a single moment of the time I spent raising those kids. So that's probably, I would consider my greatest achievement is taking care of these 5 little people that then grew up, ended up being a single mom, ended up divorced after about 18 years. And that was rough. But again, all the things I had learned raising the kids, the things I had tried to teach them, I tried to apply to myself and I buckled down. And that was about the time when I met you, I think, is when I first became a single mom. And there was a moment when I was, working a few different jobs and trying to raise 5 kids. I had sole custody of them and for various reasons had no financial support. So it was just me. So I took on a couple extra jobs. I was a server for a while at a couple different places. I taught driver's ed. That was exciting. I think I was doing that when I met you. I was teaching driver's ed for a couple years, and then working as a trainer at the rec center there. And I think about the time I met you, my oldest son went into the military, and then I just had four at home. And then eventually he moved back to Idaho. And yeah, I think all of my kids had a time when they were able to come and be of service to you and Lance. And that just not only made me proud of them as people, but I was so filled with gratitude for the choices I had made to invest in them. And I saw the fruit of that when they were able to be of service to you guys. So that was one of the first things that I was able to see come full circle, was that effort I had put into raising them and the hope that they would turn out to be decent people, and then to see them be of service to you and see the expression of that effort that I put in. That was very rewarding for me as a mom, to see
Right.
them be decent humans.
And they always did it with a smile on their face. I mean, they came over and they were in a good mood and they communicated well with Lance, and they were always ready to do whatever we asked them to do. Well, whatever I asked them to do. And so they would come over and work, do various little projects, or they would come over and they would spend time painting rocks with Lance, because I know four of them came over one time without you and painted rocks with us, and got pictures of them in Lance's giant chair. And it was just always so much fun. You're there, they were always very well behaved, very respectful, just like you always were when you came into our home. And it was just such a great combination. And I think, initially thinking about how we became friends, it when you look at the surface, it doesn't make any sense because our lives were so different. But when you start digging deeper, that's where you find the connections. And I think that that's what has really worked for us, is because you and I both really like that deep connection. I don't have superficial relationships.
Neither do I. Um, it's always been important to me to find a point of connection with anyone. Um, and I work in customer service now. I'm no longer a trainer. I resigned from that last year. And I work in customer service. I work for an airline. And one of the things I love most about my job is encountering strangers and being able to find a point of connection, something that's deeper than, hello, how are you? Fine. All right. Have a good day. That interaction is fine, and it serves the purposes of customer service. But if I can possibly find some deeper point of connection, it just fills my soul. And I see you do the same thing. And I think that was that connection, that depth is probably what we have most in common.
I I believe that's it. I think the important thing about the connection that you try to find with other people, and that I do as well, is you want to learn more about people, but you also want people to feel like they are seen. And a big part of that for me is, and maybe it's because you and I both came from large families. And when you have so many siblings, you end up kind of invisible at times. And then I became a caregiver and I felt invisible hiding behind his wheelchair for so many years. So it's really important for me to let other people know that I see them.
Well, you've taught me a lot about how to make that connection, particularly with uh, people who are caregivers or people with disabilities. You taught me how to be respectful, how to be helpful, how to engage in a way that makes them feel comfortable and at ease. And so that has again served me very well. I can remember not that long ago, maybe 6 months ago, my daughter and I were at the grocery store and we saw a woman walking with a walker and another woman with her. And the woman with the walker had some things, groceries on her walker, and was pushing her walker, and the lady next to her was carrying a lot of groceries, and I could see they were struggling. And I immediately, because I had some things in my hand, I said to my daughter, I said, hey, run up there and see if you can help them up to the register. And she didn't even question or think about it. She just ran up there and took some things from the woman's hands, and then she assisted the lady with the walker, got them up to the check stand. And I just thought, I don't think she would have felt as comfortable doing that. And I don't think I would have noticed that had we not spent time with you guys. So, I mean, it's really helped us, I think all of us, to be more aware and more respectful of people with limitations. So,
I hope that sharing some of how we met and the connection that we found, despite thinking that we didn't have anything in common at the beginning, I hope that this is helpful to other people because as a caregiver, having friendships, having girlfriends especially, was so important to me. And you were always very understanding of the fact that I really didn't have any time outside of training and we still made it work. So I hope that people can find common ground with their friends who are caregivers and reach out to them more often because even though we can't do things or we might be saying no to a lot of things, we might be saying no to everything. It isn't because we don't want to spend time with you. It's because we don't have the time.
I'm glad that this didn't end with personal training and that we became friends and that we're able to do this now. So, thank you for inviting me into your life, and thank you for inviting me into this journey.
Well, thank you for joining me, Jenna. I love having you here.
All right, see you next time.